Just letting everybody know that I am streaming on my end. So whenever you guys are ready, I am good.
Okay, call the meeting to order. Tracy, take roll, please.
Harrington,
Here.
Hoffman,
Here.
Pollock, Smith,
Here.
Wason.
Here.
Okay, the agenda's before you. There's no real changes to it, so a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed, motion carries. Consent agenda, anything on there that anyone would like to talk about first?
Mayor, I was going to ask staff if there was any additions to the memo that came out in the PD note on the settlement with the ABD. Is that any concern, or do we see anything coming from that as a suspension or anything from what occurred?
They served a suspension. This is the license application after their suspension was complete.
Okay, and was that a first suspension for that business?
Yes.
Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you,
Anything
Jason.
else?
No, I had the same question. Thank you.
You bet. Anyone wish to make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. I'll second.
And seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, we're missing the city engineer.
Yes, I'm sorry. Kevin wasn't going to be able to make it tonight. He did not have anything to report. He'll have more to report next time on the St. Andrews Drive project, though, which is moving forward, as well as the Southwest Utilities project. Nothing substantial, though, for tonight.
Thank you. Ryan, your report?
Just a few things. Really nothing new on the COVID front, at least from a city operations standpoint. Other than, of course, the face mask resolution that's before you this evening. Also wanted to point out in your packet is an update from the Access Center, a construction update. They submitted that along with the invoice, which was on the claims list this evening. You might recall the agreement said that they could request payments at 25, 50, 75, and 100%. Currently, they're at about 35% of the completion of the project, and they have requested $125,000 reimbursement for that. So things seem to be moving along nicely, and Matthew Miller will continue to send updates and invoices as the project moves forward. And then the final thing I had this evening was just a real quick update on the Moxie Solar agreement. Jason Hall and I and our bond counsel have been going back and forth, and we're shooting for an agreement to be on the August 11th agenda. That's what I had this evening.
Any questions for Ryan? Okay. Moving to my report, I have a proclamation, American Wind Week. Whereas wind energy is the largest provider of renewable energy in the country, and whereas wind provides 42% of Iowa state electrical generation, ranking first in the nation, and provides enough energy to power 2.4 million households, ranking second in the nation. And whereas Iowa is home to 11 wind turbine manufacturing facilities and almost 10,000 jobs, supported by wind and solar throughout the state. And whereas wind projects in Iowa have attracted nearly $19 billion in investment to date and provide $61 million in Iowa communities through state and local tax payments, spurring development of our schools, infrastructure, and public safety. And whereas in 2019 alone, rural landowners in Iowa received $69 million in land lease payments from wind projects, providing a steady, independent source of income despite unstable markets. Therefore, as Mayor of North Liberty, do hereby proclaim the City of North Liberty recognizes America Wind Week, August 9th through 15th, 2020. Moving ahead, Lynn County REC site plan application. Commission and staff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is Lynn County had acquired southern lot of 104 of Intercity Industrial Park Part 2, added it to their existing facility on 240th Street. So we're looking at a 21,000 square foot warehouse, pretty utilitarian in design. It's a metal building, measures 29 feet from grade to the peak. It's gray with some blue in it to match the existing building that they have along 240th. It's set back about 380 feet. The building would be from the edge of pavement. And so it'd be obscured by the existing building to the north and some vegetation, some trees along 240th Street. Because it doesn't actually front on 240th Street, the 25% masonry requirement is not required. City staff did request for Lynn County REC, and they agreed to provide additional landscaping along the southern property line. This is due to the city's future land use map calls for that area to the south to be commercial with some residential. So there's the potential to be some incompatible uses at some point in the future. So we did request the additional landscaping, and they provided that on the plan that's before you. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the site plan. It's July 7th meeting. Staff recommends the City Council approve the site plan as well. I do have some exhibits if there are additional questions.
Any questions initially for Ryan?
Ryan, the only questions I have are basically about landscaping, just so that we get this right. Would it be helpful? Do you have anything that would be able to ease our minds a little bit more than what, or can we expand upon that a little bit?
Yeah, let me share my screen real quick. So this is kind of the site plan as it showed, and just the site plan superimposed on the aerial photograph, just showing how far it's set back. You do have some land to the south here that is zoned industrial at this point, but on the long range plan, city's comprehensive plan, it is called for commercial with residential, so a mixture of uses. So I think the city would be open to a mixed use development to the south. Here's the site plan of the building. This is the existing facility. Here's the proposed building here. Blue building with the earth tone colors. And actually, the additional landscaping that we asked for was right along this area to the south here. It was pretty sparsely landscaped and met just what the minimum code requirements are. There's some additional landscaping next to parking spots. But what we did ask for is some infill of landscaping along the south property line, just to give that a chance to grow in case there's some future development to the south here when that farm field develops.
Thank you. That's what I was wondering if there's anything different about what we had seen in the packet or not. I like if you could put that back up there again. I like the their property to the east still has trees there, but there's still a decent buffer, and you get a better sense of this, I guess, in the color photo up there. Is this building in the parking lot going to go literally to that line right there, and then their existing space past our water tower, and then where those trees are over there is pretty well where they are right now. So there's a larger grass buffer area before you hit that landscaping over there on that side. So that's not going to exist here where this building is located, I get the impression then.
You're talking about these improvements over here?
Yeah, so where those are right now, I guess if you go to the first image that you shared with us right there. So is that building going to go literally right there, and then that property line is going to be right there where we see, or will there be any buffer of grass before we hit trees like we see there to the east?
So yeah, so what you have here is existing driveway that comes down, and this is a shared driveway, and it comes all the way to the water tower. And then the pavement ties in this location here.
Uh-huh.
And there's a drive that comes in here and then wraps around at this point here.
Okay.
There are some stormwater management facilities, I believe, in this location, but existing vegetation here, and then this area would be filled in right here.
Okay. I wish, or I'm hoping, and I don't know if it's possible, and that this building could be shifted north, or the parking lot could be shifted north, so that there wouldn't be more than, it looks like there's about 6 to 10 feet between that parking lot and the property line, and then it's just filled with trees. I wish that there was a way for it to be further away than just stacked right up there, because of what we've been talking about with the development that could happen to the south. We could have, the duplexes. We could have somebody's backyard right there. We might not, but we might. So having more of a buffer there that matches what's over there to the east would be better. Is it at all possible is the question.
Well, it's possible. So the buffer to the south is 15 feet wide. So it's dimensioned here.
Okay,
And
sorry.
So it's possible to shrink up that buffer and increase that buffer. They would have to reduce the area of their pavement.
Yeah. So have you had that conversation, or do you know if that's possible? Because that's what I'm going. That's what I'm going for. It's in making that buffer wider.
I haven't specifically had that conversation with the applicant, but I know the applicant is here this evening.
Okay. Thank you.
Is this an appropriate time to talk?
It will be in a minute.
Okay.
Any questions for Ryan?
Ryan, there was something noted in there that referred to the fire marshal's recommendations. I didn't see what those were. Was there something specific that needed to be addressed?
So these were just some comments that the fire marshal had going through before we went to the planning commission. And so what the fire marshal did, provided those comments to the engineer, and the plan you have in front of you today reflects those comments being addressed from the fire marshal. So we actually held the site plan back till those comments were addressed, and then placed it on this agenda when we were satisfied with that.
I appreciate Chris talking about the buffer there. These are types of situations where 10 plus years from now, we find ourselves in a similar situation to maybe what we have with Colony Pumpkin Patch, right? They're surrounded by residential, and then we have recommendations that we don't allow them to, do certain things or increase business or those types of things. So anytime there's border issues this way with residential, I'm always a little hesitant.
Well, and I would like to provide one clarification, and I'll go back to sharing my screen one more time if I may.
Sure, go ahead.
So what you have here is a situation where you actually have the zoning, the actual zoning to the south is industrial. And so that provides a limitation in the code of what the city can actually require as far as the code requirement, right? Because you're not buffering against non-residential uses. And so the logic that staff provided is our future map provides for part of this area to be residential, that's yellow, and then this area to the south could be a mixture of residential and commercial. So the property to the south has a development right for industrial development. However, if somebody came to us that owns that property and said, we have a vision for commercial and residential uses here, I think we would be open to that, because that's what the future land use map shows. And so that was the thought process behind, not requiring, say a 25 or a 50-foot buffer. Staff looked at it as you have an existing industrial zoning to the south. However, there is the future potential for this to be some other residential commercial use. And so additional buffering would be a good idea in that location to give it a chance to grow.
I appreciate that explanation and the forecasted thought by your group. That's great. Thank you.
I would also add there that we would also ask the person who's developing that southern piece as commercial or residential for some additional buffer as well to protect those homes. And frankly, they probably want to do that just from a resale value. So.
Any additional questions? If not, Doug, you're on deck. Can't hear you. You're still muted, sir.
Sorry. There you go. Yeah, the reason for the width of that pavement is just these trucks have to go in at 90 degrees. And so that's just kind of a minimum turning radius as we have getting in and out of the buildings. It just happened to fit what they were asking for to begin with. Otherwise, I mean, we'd gladly shrink it, but it's just truck turning movement. So we're trying to provide as much cover and landscaping as is required by the city.
Questions for Doug?
So Doug, that's the same to the north then. So you've got north and south where trucks will need to be getting in, and that's kind of the least amount of space that they could use on both of those sides.
That's correct. They'll be pulling in through the building and basically enter the south and come out the north.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions for the gentleman? Anything else you wanted to add, sir?
No, just answer any questions anyone else has.
Okay. You have before you resolution number 2020-59. Resolution approving the development site plan for the south 280 feet of lot 104 of Intercity Industrial Park, Part 2, Lynn County Electrical Co-op Association Storage Building, North Liberty. Anyone wish to establish that resolution?
So move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Final questions or comments? Tracy, please.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Next item we have is face coverings, resolution 2020-60. And I would like to go ahead and read this for the audience that may be out there listening. Be it resolved by the City Council of the City of North Liberty, Iowa, whereas the novel coronavirus COVID-19 has affected millions of Americans, including nearly 40,000 Iowans, and Johnson County has over 1,650 cases and 10 deaths. And whereas the number of COVID-19 cases continues to rapidly increase in our nation, state, and county, placing our residents at risk of serious illness or death, and the World Health Organization has determined that wearing face shields and or cloth mask has proven to be one of the most effective means to curb the spread of COVID-19 virus among persons in public settings. And whereas it is critically important to protect residents, visitors, students, and employees in the City of North Liberty from the spread of COVID-19, and the City of North Liberty desires that individuals and businesses in the city comply with recommended practices to reduce the spread of the virus, including social distancing and the use of face shields or cloth masks. Therefore, be it resolved that the North Liberty Face Covering Public Health Initiative is hereby adopted to combat the spread of COVID-19, to wit, all persons within the corporate limits of the City of North Liberty are advised to keep social distance and to wear face shields or cloth masks as described hereafter. Persons should wear a cloth mask or face shield whenever they are, 1, in public as opposed to being in one's place of residence, when one cannot stay 6 feet away from others. 2, inside of any indoor public settings, for example, but not limited to grocery stores, pharmacies, hardware stores, retail stores, or other public settings that are not one's place of residence, and when with persons who do not live in the household. 3, outside if keeping 6 feet away from others is not possible, using public transportation or private cars, including taxis, rideshare, or carpooling. Notwithstanding the above, the following persons should not wear a mask covering when persons younger than 2 years of age due to risk of suffocation, anyone who has trouble breathing is on oxygen therapy on a ventilator. Anyone who is unconscious, incapacitated, or otherwise unable to remove the cloth mask covering without assistance. Anyone who has been told by a medical, legal, or behavioral health professional not to wear face coverings. Furthermore, it is not necessary to wear a face covering while traveling in a personal vehicle alone or with household members. While a person is alone or is in the presence of only household members, while exercising at moderate or high intensity, for example, jogging or biking, while seated at a food establishment in the process of eating or drinking, while attaining a service that would require temporary removal of the person's mask covering, when federal or state law prohibits wearing a face covering or requires the removal of the face covering. Appropriate use of a cloth mask covering includes a snug fit, but comfortable against the side of the face, completely covers the nose and mouth, is secured with ties or ear loops, provides multiple layers of fabric, allows for breathing without restriction, can be laundered and machine dried without damage or change to shape. Businesses operating within the corporate limits of North Liberty should adopt must-wear policies which comport with this initiative to provide reasonable protection for their patrons and staff. These practices should continue indefinitely until substantial progress in curbing the spread of COVID-19 virus has been declared by public health officials as being concluded. We wanted to go ahead and use this route because I think the council, as individuals, want to go ahead and put themselves on record that we fully back the Department of Health's recommendations. And that it is very important that the citizens and businesses adhere to them. In addition, we wanted to give the businesses a little more leverage and to edge them closer to must-wear masks when patrons come in, so they don't feel like they're being picked on or they're going to be under the threat of losing customers, as has been explained to me in the past. So this is the tack that we're doing. It's in an indefinite period of time until the council in some form or fashion overturns it once circumstances dictate. So that's our reasoning. You have any questions or comments ahead of time? If not, I would be asking council to move on the resolution appropriately. Anyone wish to establish that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final discussion or questions?
Mayor, I would add that businesses can reach out to City Hall, to Ryan or Tracy, where they could get them in touch with our Iowa City Area Together Steering Committee that is working on some business placards that businesses could place in their windows that have signage about wearing masks, encouraging folks to wear masks, and that's some work that's being done. So if they can reach out, we can certainly help with that.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I think we all can do our part in this, this is a simple thing. And I know some people are opposed wearing masks for many reasons, but I think locally we can do our part. We want our businesses to remain open and our kids to eventually return to school in some capacity. So I'm definitely in favor of this. I don't want anyone to get sick, or I personally do not want to get sick. So I appreciate, us having this and supporting wearing mask or shield in public.
Other comments and questions are welcome. Ryan, you're the one that's really behind the 8 ball on this a lot of time.
So I'll just go ahead and just say that I'm totally in favor of this. There are some people who object based on just personal liberty concerns and stuff. And I would just say that the face masks are protective of other people from you if you happen to be sick, and the face shields are actually help protect you from other people if they're sick. So if you could do both of them, like we do here all day long, it would be beneficial. So, I think that the best we should do that. I have a lot of sick people who have underlying pulmonary diseases, and they can wear a face mask, and I can do a lung transplant on somebody, and we make them wear a face mask, and they can do it. So,
Other comments or questions?
Just echo my fellow counselors here. Proud of our city and thanks to the staff for doing all the work here. You too, Mayor. It is important that we all do our part. We obviously have the responsibility for the health of our community, and it's good that we're formalizing this and working together very collaboratively within our broader community as well within Johnson County. So just thanks everyone. It's not the easiest as we've discussed, but it's definitely the right thing to do. Hopefully to start to turn things for the better here collectively. So just appreciate everyone doing their part here.
Anything else? Tracy, take roll.
Carrington,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Wason,
aye.
Hoffman.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Thank you very much, Council, for passing that. Next item is social justice and racial equity in North Liberty. And Ryan, I'm kicking that off to you.
Okay, thanks, Mayor. You have in your packet this evening a report that we put together, and I'll say that tonight we want to share some information with you and ultimately highlight some of the data that we've been talking about over the past few weeks or that we've heard questions about. And we also want to talk a little bit about some other things that Chief Venega and her team have been working on and continue to work on. And then also to close, talk a little bit about the next steps. And as you all know and have signed up for, a big part of the next step is our listening post. And we'll get to that in a bit. You'll notice there's no action item on the agenda tonight. It's really a presentation and discussion. And so we're going to zip through this presentation, and then hopefully there'll be questions and or other comments or suggestions. But ultimately then over the course of the next 2 weeks, we're going to go out to the public and seek some input from those folks as well. So tonight you'll hear from me first briefly. I'm going to pass it over to Diane, where she's going to talk a little bit more into detail about the statistics you have in front of you, and then I'll close it up. And then Nick's also been instrumental in this. He's here as well. He will be in the background and jumping in if we've missed anything or anything needs further clarification. So since we released some information in early June, I think it was, about police statistics, we had a number of questions. There was some confusion in those statistics. For example, one thing I think you've all heard, and we tried to clarify a little bit at the last meeting, was that people were thinking we were going to stop collecting certain data. That's just simply not true. In fact, quite the opposite. What we're trying to do is dissect some of the data we have, and then Chief Venega is working with her software consultant to see if there's a mechanism or another way for us to collect some additional information when our officers are out working. So as I mentioned, tonight we're going to dive deeper into some of the information we've already provided. But before we do that, I'm going to take an opportunity just to go over the first page in that report, and that's demographics. And that's pretty self-explanatory, but I do want to point out just a couple things in there. We put this in here just really as a comparison to show how North Liberty compares to the rest of Iowa and to the rest of the United States. And I'm not going to go through each bullet point, but what I wanted to point out is what those arrows mean. And I'm assuming if you looked at it pretty closely, you probably have a good idea. But so for in areas where you see arrows pointing up, the green arrows pointing up, that means North Liberty is higher when compared to that column. So persons under the age of 18, you can see, for example, that North Liberty is higher average than Iowa, as well as the United States. If you go up one to persons under 5, you can see we're quite a bit higher when compared to Iowa and the United States. That's why there's 2 arrows. There's no magic formula here. It's really somewhat subjective. We just looked at if we're 40% roughly or more higher, then we'd go with 2 arrows. If we were lower than that, we'd go with 1. So that's a real snapshot. And this is all data, as you can see, from the 2015 population. And we tried to take the data from 2015 statistics from Iowa and US as well. And we can update that when our new census comes out as well. So that's demographics. With that said, I'm going to let the chief get into the meat of it here with some statistics. So Diane, please.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for this opportunity. On the next page, it just talks about our budget. This really shouldn't be a surprise for us since we take care of this and we do this annually and everybody gets to see that. However, a couple things I just wanted to point out. Under the revenues, we have never been a department that, and I call it policing for profit. You'll see that when you look a little bit further into the stats and the data for, warnings and say warnings are so, public education are so high in there. So that is just one thing that I want to throw out there for our revenues. And of course, personnel is, because we are one of the larger departments, it is one of the biggest expense for our entity. And that's what I wanted to share on reference to the budget. Getting into the next page, we're talking about citation and arrest data. And this is something that all departments collect. We have that information readily available. It's because a separate form is created and we have the demographics and specifics on that form. So when looking at this, comparing it to the population demographics of North Liberty, just our residents, it shows that we are have racial disparity in what we're doing by arresting between white and Black individuals, and then the other category is other. So this, we have typically been about a 70-30%, probably for the past 7 years. And again, it just continues to increase. What we did additionally is we broke that down by what is officer initiated activity and then what is called in by the public. I see that as a big thing to talk about, because what I can control, I cannot necessarily control the calls that are coming in by the public. However, what we can control is the activities that the officers are involved with, whether that be traffic stops or whether that be stopping and talking to folks that are on the street. So that's why those numbers are actually listed out there to show with our demographics. The other thing with the demographics is it's talking about actual residents. We have a lot of motoring public that goes through that are not residents of North Liberty, but yet they are included in our arrest and citation data for our statistics. I also wanted to mention that officer initiated activity, it's also been an expectation of mine that these officers are proactive. What we didn't want for this department is that they're all just a call taker, and a call taker would just be responding to a public's calls for service. So with this proactive police department, I do expect that our officer initiated activity to increase because when there is downtime, they need to be busy. They need to make contact with the public. They need to be out there doing some community education and public relation work. So that is something that we expect. We also monitor this when we're doing our annual reviews for our officers. What we have also noticed is with the public calls, and you'll see that when we start getting into arrest, we broke it down by when the public made that phone call to the police or when the officer just happened to run across somebody in the public as we move forward and with this data. The next one, like I said, that we can control the traffic stops and officer initiated activity. It just shows what options that we as police officers have when we're interacting with the public. And on this page, I immediately see that warnings and education are at 85%. I'm really proud of that. That's what I expect. Again, it's not that policing for profit, but it's just something that, we expect our officers to be making stops, making some education and giving people a fair shake and break when they need to. We were able to break down our traffic citations by race. And so you'll see that on the next page. We tried to, what we found is that there's not the best model out here to get all of this information out to the public. And so this was what we created. What we hope to do is in the future is keep expanding on this and adding to this document so we can continue to share and be transparent with that information. And so when you'll see on the council report, I do break it down by alcohol, crimes against persons, crimes against property, and then drug offenses. And so that's kind of how we modeled it on this page as well. And you'll see that when we start getting into search data. So the search information, and this is where we see that we are lacking a way to collect some data. And that's what Ryan mentioned, that I'm looking with our software company to do this. And so out of the, I think we have 178 searches that we had out of the 6,000 plus contacts. Basically that is at 2.8% that we have this, that we're searching folks. But also included in this is when Falco is called or he alerts on a vehicle, then that is included as well. And so when you're looking at the probable cause to arrest or probable cause to search, 80 of those were drug-related offenses and 44 of those Falco was involved for that. The consent search is also when officers have asked permission. Basically, a person is free to leave and they go back and again, no enforcement action. They don't have their identification, they don't have any of that. And they ask if they can search their vehicle or search their person and they have allowed it. And so that's what this is on here. What we hope to do in the future is expand upon these searches. And so that way there'd be a separate form that an officer would fill out. It would tie it back to the calls for service. So what they had to do with this is they had to open up every single calls for service and go in there and look at information. The information is there. It just takes quite a bit of time to go in and pull that out and extract it. So we're looking at having this provided, running into a few hiccups. It's not just going to be North Liberty, but we're also looking at countywide and try to have better information for these searches of persons, vehicles in the future for this. So this is something that is on our current list. We're working on right now to try to get additional information on that. The next page gets into a lot of information, and that's where we're trying to break it down to crimes against persons, crimes against property, the nuisance type crimes, traffic offenses, and then the obstruction crimes. It is broken down by race. And as you're going through this page, you see all the offenses listed on the side. Really what I was trying to look at is, crimes against person, we don't have the discretion. We have a victim wants to pursue the charges, a victim wants to be involved in the case. And this isn't something that an officer is going to, decide, make their own decision if they're going to move forward or not. And also, it also depends upon the severity of the crime. So anything that is generally a serious misdemeanor above, which a serious misdemeanor is anything over a traffic violation or these simple misdemeanor crimes, the officer generally is probably going to move forward with charges based on the behavior of that individual and the level of offense. The other thing that on this is crimes against persons and like the warrant service arrest. And again, I basically go back that there's no discretion that the officers have that they can decide to arrest somebody on a warrant or on a domestic violence offense. Those are mandatory arrest situations. We have to make those arrests and we have to, the discretion is taken away from the officers on that. The one thing I wanted to mention on the one slide, it looked obstruction crimes and it was basically the interference charges. This is something that we look at, for officer discretion. Is it one officer that's filing all of these interference charges or is it multiple officers? This is tracked not only by the supervisors of each officer, but also by this department. And really what this comes down to is when I talked with, met with on the phone with Dr. Barnum, he is a criminology analyst for St. Ambrose University. And he was talking because our numbers are so small, it's really difficult to come in and do a whole analytical study on our arrest. Basically, he explained it to me as like flipping a coin. And so when you're having 11 arrests, he just thought those numbers were too small. Anything less than 100 made it really difficult for his analyzing piece on what he's doing. The next slide, there's just something that we wanted to put in there about repeat offenders. We do have some career criminals that live in North Liberty. And we know those addresses, we know those offenders, and they do pop up. And so with that, we ended up with 23% of all of our arrests were folks that we've had prior contact with. And even going back, looking at the numbers, one individual was 10 times, another individual was 8 times. So it's also just more than one time, but wanted to put those numbers in there. I do want to specify that these are actual one-time that you come in contact to make an arrest. There's a whole nother data piece that you can start doing, and that's looking at charges. We did not do that on this. This is just basically one offense, the highest offense that occurred, counted as an arrest just for this data. And then I wanted to talk about discretionary arrest. This is something else that, again, the supervisors look at, we look at to make sure that the officers are doing what they're doing. And again, small numbers when you're looking at for each criminal charge, but we really focus on the behavior of the individual. And even though I say it's a discretionary arrest, an example might be public intoxication. An arrest is a last resort. If we can find somebody who's sober that can take care of the person, if we can find a family member, a friend, if we can find a place for them, if we can get an Uber home, if they're able to take care of it for themselves, then that's something that we're always willing to do. However, if they're so severely intoxicated, they have ruined all of their resources or their chances with their family members or friends, then we cannot leave these individuals on the street. We have to find a place for them. So that's when they end up in our care and custody, and we end up with an arrest. Same on a trespass. For any trespass, there's not only the owner of the property or the tenant holder gives them a warning that they need to leave. We show up and we also give them the warning that they need to leave. So if they refuse to leave, we try to do everything in our power to get them to comply with the order and to go on their merry way. If they refuse, then like I said, we do have to arrest, and we end up with those numbers there.
Diane, can I pop a real quick question? Do you anticipate, for example, on public intoxication with the new access center, that you'll have a place to take some of these folks that may not have family or friend to help?
Absolutely. If they are cooperative, if they're willing to get help, if they're willing to go to the access center, then by all means, that's kind of what that's what that place is designed for. And really, it's just given a place that they can go, have supervision, and sleep it off. And that's exactly what it's for. And we hope to utilize it once that's up and running for that purpose. Also wanted to show in there that the work that we have done, there's a lot of monitoring mechanisms that we have for all of our law enforcement officers. And it's not just North Liberty, but these are things that we can go back and track and find out what the staff is doing, what interactions that they had. Another thing that we added, and I didn't even put this in the equipment, is we recently installed blackout screens in our cars. And what that does, if you think about it, as an officer is going down the road, in the past, they'd be able to run the plate of the vehicle that's in front of them. There's warnings and bells and whistles that go off if the person has a warrant for their arrest, if there's no driver's license, there's problems with their status. And now with having those blackout screens, the officer has to be stopped, or they have to make a conscious call into dispatch to run that vehicle if they're trying to find some probable cause to stop that vehicle. The blackout screens is to eliminate distracted driving. So if we can use technology, and again, to help keep our officers safe, then by all means, we're going to do it. So that's another monitoring piece that we have on there. The other thing that we're recently working with is Kevin Sanders is the local NAACP president for Iowa City. And so after we met with him, we were asking if there's something that we can do immediately with their partnership. And one thing that came up is just talking about complaints. If we receive any racial bias complaints, he will sign a confidentiality agreement. He's willing to come in, take a look at it, and basically give me that outside perspective for how these complaints are going, or any options or recommendations that he might have from him or his organization. So that's something that he agreed to do, and we're going to work on getting that set up so we have that more immediate with all the other reviews tracking for this. The next page is really talking about our training, and another thing that I am proud of, because we have focus on we have a young department, young officers, and we spend an exorbitant amount of time with training. And when I talk about having officers that are proactive, they're proactive not only in their police work, but they're also proactive in their training. And so I think we did an average, it's 160 hours of training over the course of the year. And that's not including the 560 hours of the police academy or the 3 months that they're with a field training officer when they come out. But this is across all the entire department for all of us that we receive. And the training's never gonna end. So that was something that we wanted to throw out there so folks know. So moving forward, we just wanted to look at areas that we can develop and implement a solution to build a safer and a more just community. I know that the North Liberty officers, our sergeants, my command staff are dedicated to the lives, to protecting of this community. And we look forward to new opportunities that we can work with our community and partner moving forward. So from here, I will turn it back over to Ryan, and I'll be able to answer any questions that you may have.
Maybe now would be a good time to take questions on the data. There's a lot in there. And as you all know, everyone can read data a little bit differently and make different interpretations out of it. That's why we didn't come out and say this is what the data says, because it probably says a lot of things. But what we want to do is make sure that it's transparent. And I think Diane alluded to this, and I'll just reaffirm that what we intend to do is provide what you see there. This is kind of a template now each year going forward that we can provide this data as part of the police department's annual report. And as Diane acknowledged, there may be some additional information as she works with her vendors, but this is kind of what we see as the template, and certainly would like to know if you have any questions or thoughts or comments on that.
I have just a few things. If I was reading my notes, and so I appreciate the chief putting all that together. And I've been kind of looking at some of these statistics for the last couple months when we were starting to get some of these things together. So a couple things I'm really struck by is the amount of training per officer is very high. It's basically a whole month worth of officer time just training every year to stay on top of everything. A lot of people have kind of commented about what are people getting for mental health education and things like that, and that's actually in there. If you can get on like the city website and look at it, they spend a lot of time on mental health training, community or crisis intervention training, how to try and de-escalate things. So I think that the educational component just from the officers is very helpful. A couple of the other things that was very striking was the amount of arrests that were due to just a few individuals. So there are a few people who are actually skewing the data for everybody. And I think that needs to kind of be taken into consideration. I'm glad that you kind of were able to kind of divide that out a little bit. And the one thing that was a little bothersome is a lot of arrests, unfortunately, seem to be drug and alcohol related, and then domestic violence. And that doesn't seem to necessarily favor white or black. It seems to be a problem for everybody. And that's an area maybe that, we can work on a little bit is, to support, the programs that help people with those substance abuse issues. And I think that's about my major takeaways from all the data that was presented. So I appreciate you putting all that together.
Yeah, I just want to jump in. Brian kind of hit it on the head with a lot of this and looking at the data and everything that's being shown. The officer, and thank you for putting this together. I know it was a real joy to do that, to dig through all this data. But again, just to piggyback on that, saying, you know, just figuring out what those encounters are with law enforcement when they're happening. And it does appear to be a lot of domestic violence and substance abuse things that are sparking that. Also, and the data may say this, but I don't know if they track just some of the encounters that they do have with people, like when they're the education and I think it was, you touched on it, the education component, when they're just stopping people and talking to them too, and looking at those warnings and education is what it is, which means that that number is high, which means they still have a lot of interactions with people in our community. So not sure how those encounters go, if they remain positive, if they're just talking to them and educating them, or if they escalate to something else just because they are having those encounters. But nonetheless, for me, just looking at this data to be able to kind of digest it a little bit more, and read through it and really take in a lot of these numbers and see where we are and what improvements we can make. But to say that the officers do have an awful lot of training that goes behind for de-escalation and so forth is very good to see. So thank you.
Chief, to Rakisha's question there, is that part of the conversation you're having with the vendor, our data tracking vendor, about the warnings and education piece and whether that's trackable? I assume that's what you're asking, Rakisha, whether it's if we can put a race to that piece as well. Did I understand that question right?
Yeah, and the reason I said that is when you're looking at it, there's no race on it. So are we stopping and having conversation and educating people, more people of color versus non-people of color, just for general purposes, because we see them outside, or what's warranting those, and if we're tracking those encounters?
So yes, that is one of the pieces that we're missing. And so unless they write a written warning or a citation, then that's not going to get tracked. Now it might be in the calls for service, but I'm not tasking anybody to go through 6,330 some calls for service to track that information. Plus we're running into some obstacles. And so now even when you run a driver's license, race does not pop up. It's optional. So officers don't know it, it's not showing up in the database, and that's something there. The other issue with all this tracking is, so somebody said they want tracks of all police encounters. Well, that is, again, very difficult. It's going to be an educational piece, because if somebody calls in and they're handling a phone request, there's certain things that we don't ask that we're not going to ask. If officers are doing a bar check, late at night, and they talk to 5 individuals, I don't expect them to come back, fill out, a form on 5 different individuals. However, for the actual stop, physical arrest, or physical encounter, physical stop of a vehicle, a person, a pedestrian, then that's what we're going to be looking at for that tracking component. I've seen it. They're working on it at a state level. They're also working at it on a local level. So there might be a couple different ways that we can track it. Plus, what we also want to do is be able to link that back to that calls for service. So what's so important about it is It's not just a piece of paper we're handing to an officer to fill out. It's going to have GPS coordinates. It's going to have the date and the time. It's going to follow up that they, made that contact with dispatch. So again, it's that accountability piece that we want to make sure that we incorporate with this data collection. Iowa City has a data collection piece. We're trying to copy that. And again, I'm just running into some hurdles with our GPS because now it's going to have to coordinate with our GPS. It's just some things that I hope the computer folks can figure out sooner than later. But we're working on it.
Comments or questions?
So Chief, a couple of, go ahead, Annie, please.
I was just gonna say, Chief, it was great hearing this. You walk us through this document. Obviously, reading it, I think the quantitative is really important to have, and it'll be good that we, continue to capture this so we have the years to come. So it'll be nice then to see further with sort of the qualitative side of things with these listening posts and more of the conversation that we've had. So just want to say thank you for your tireless efforts, Nick, Ryan, Tracy, everyone, all your officers, Chief. But I just think it's important because the community is interested in this information. We have lots of citizens reaching out, asking questions, broadly, some specifics. So I think the more we can stay in front of this and be informed ourselves and inform the community, the better off we're going to be. So Chief, bottom line, just thank you for everything you're doing.
Brent?
Thanks, Mayor. There was something really important that you put in there, Chief. I was really glad to see it, and it brought up a story to mind that I got from a mother that was talking to me about all of this. And that was the officer initiated stops and contacts and the public initiated calls. That's an important breakout. And here's a real life story in North Liberty that took place. A member of the neighborhood had put together some goodie bags or something for children, and because of COVID, didn't want to go around house to house, face to face, that kind of thing. Put a message out to Facebook, hey, send your kids over. The goodie bags are on the porch. We hope everybody's having a good day, a good weekend kind of thing. So a number of the neighbors throughout the day as they came home from work sent their white children over to take the goodie bags off the porch. And when the black family got home, they sent their child over to grab his goodie bag, and the police were called. That is appalling. And this mother, not the mother of the black child, but the mother of the white child, was, as I am, extremely sad that occurs and takes place in our small town Iowa community. Sometimes we have to manage perception along with managing education on the data pieces. We need to do everything that we can as council members to share stories like that with our neighbors, our friends, our families, so that kind of thing doesn't happen. That was a call for service that should have never happened. And once they found out what had taken place, your officer that responded was phenomenal and spoke with those families about the issue, actually went back to the call taker's residence and explained what had taken place for some education. With the data, the things that jump out, our population showing only white 88.2%, only black 4.7%. And in most of those categories, the traffic stops, the drug stops, or arrests, whites are about 70 to 72%. Like you said, it's about that 70-30 split. Drugs were a 70-30 split. So I think the perception and what I'm hearing, and Rakisha, I'm very interested in what you're hearing from your constituents as well on that disparity. And what I mean is, with the black population of North Liberty being 4.7% and the drug arrest being 30%, people see that high number of 30% and see the low number of 4.7, and there is a perception that is that is had. So what do we need to do to help fix that? One, on a policing side, Chief, and then two, I guess, Councilor Harrington, on that perception side, and what folks are actually experiencing on our streets. And I'm really looking forward to learning about that from the stories from folks at the listening posts.
So, I'll just answer from what I know. Like, that's why I was asking about the contact in terms of just stopping and educating and having those conversations, because it's happening and it's not reported. And I'll tell a personal story from my own encounter with law enforcement that happened with me and my husband being out in the community just walking, and we were stopped by law enforcement and was told that they were out looking for a suspect and so forth. But we weren't given any information about whether or not we should be on high alert. Should we go home? Should we continue walking? And so forth. So even if, you know, my husband or one of us fit the description, there was no education behind that as well. So if say for instance, if law enforcement is just highly patrolling certain areas in the community, which we can identify and name those areas where probably most of the contact is happening, like that's a problem in itself, because the law enforcement is not patrolling other neighborhoods or, you know, areas in our community, which would kind of like change the numbers or the amount of contact, you know. So those are encounters that like I often hear about with people in the community, and it's more so that, you know, you see them young people walking and they're getting stopped by law enforcement, and people are like, well, what happened? Because from just a person observer, it just looks like that person was just out walking and they get stopped. But I see, you know, we can see white people walking and doing things and they're not stopped. So I think that's the perception. And you just gave a great example of, you know, if a neighbor puts something on their porch and people are able to go. I mean, we hear stories about this all the time, and I don't think those stories get back to the police department. I don't think the chief hears those stories. Those are stories that we see on social media or just from conversations, but they're not reported or followed up. Or if, you know, an officer comes out, that is almost as if that person is guilty of committing a crime or something, instead of giving the benefit of the doubt. And I think that's where some of those perceptions and those experiences become negative with law enforcement, because those encounters happen as such and they don't happen across the board, regardless of the race factor. And I can't speak on all people of color, but I can tell you just from my own personal experiences of living here as well, those things happen, and they happen all too often, and you just they don't get reported to law enforcement. So I don't know if I answered your question exactly, but I'm hoping that when we have these listening posts, that we can capture some of those and maybe talk about just how law enforcement comes. If it's an education component, if kids are just walking across the street and it's unsafe, like those are encounters of, yeah, law enforcement is going to stop and talk to them and educate them about safety and so forth. If it's just a random stop of because you see young people out, like I think that's concerning and alarming. And I think you will hear from the young or people in general in terms of what those encounters are and how law enforcement is going about asking them questions to find out additional information, or are they being accusatory in those encounters. So I don't know if that was kind of what you were looking for, if I answered, but like I said, I hope the listening post sheds light not only just on those experiences, but as bystanders, what can happen when people, you know, make assumptions about whether or not it's a person of color versus a white person in our community doing the same exact thing, and what poses a threat or doesn't.
Okay, I need to turn this back to Ryan Heyer, if you would, please. You had this things that you needed to talk about.
Sure, I do. If I could, Diane, it looked like you took your button off of your mute button off. I don't know if you were going to chime in briefly there on.
I was real quick. I'm just yes, we are. We're also looking forward to these listening posts. Our officers are going to be involved and listening throughout these next steps here, and see what we can do to change. And then also there's that data collection piece that I'm really interested in for all of these traffic stops, searches, and contacts, and then the analytical piece that if we do decide to go with Dr. Barnum and what he's going to basically bring back and not only educate my department, but also this council on what he could provide. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chief. So again, as you have more of an opportunity to look through some of this data, feel free to reach out to me and the chief. We can together we can get you some responses if you have some additional questions on that. From a next step standpoint, I think we've got a good foundation set here. Nick's done a nice job of getting information out on these listening posts, and we have one as early as tomorrow. And so our thought as we were talking as a staff team is that we would of course collect that data. Council would collect that data and listen to folks and hear the concerns and ideas out there. We've started a list here, and truth be told, this list probably a good chunk of this list probably looks very familiar to Rikisha because she shared it with the mayor and I. Although there are some others. They aren't all her ideas, but most of them are. One Diane just talked about in the top areas, you know, contracting with that external data analysis so that they can look specifically at our traffic stop data. So, you know, those are things, ideas on moving forward. And I guess how I envision this, and again, point me in another direction if you want to see in another direction moved here, but how I envision this is we add to this list over the next couple of weeks based on what we all hear at these listening posts. And then we circle back at the August 11th meeting and potentially others to start prioritizing these. And we pick off maybe the top 5 for now and start moving towards or start making some progress on them and really seek the direction from the city council, prioritize these items and put a work plan together. So I think I'll kind of leave it at that. That's kind of what we're thinking. But again, if this group wants to see us go a different route, we can make that change also.
Nick, I wanted to give some time to you as far as any comments you would like to make.
As Ryan mentioned, we have our first listening post scheduled for tomorrow. We have 6 of those. We're doing 4 online and 2 in person. So we hope folks will come out and engage in those. We know this is going to take work. We know that there's systemic issues that we need to address, and so this isn't, I think we've said before, this isn't checking a box. This really is taking a hard look at the facts we have and getting more data and building habits for inclusion and anti-racist work.
Thank you.
Mayor, could I ask?
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Diane, my questions are really towards you on this, in helping us to build some context over what we're going to hear in the next 2 weeks. If the list that you put together is stuff that you're doing, stuff that you hope you're going to be able to do, are there things that you guys know that you need right now besides analytics and besides knowing what you find out over these listening posts over these next 2 weeks? are there things internally that you guys know that you need right now that we should know, have in context that the public should know that you're still trying to collect, get, acquire, however you want to call it?
Those seem to be the two that I know immediately that we need is that data component. The other thing that and I think somebody else said, instead of just having Grant or Ryan look at complaints and or use of force, do we have somebody from the outside? So that was kind of that immediate that I'm more than happy to share that information with Kevin with the NAACP, and so that's something that we can do now. We just got to get some paperwork in place and move forward on that piece. Going forward, I think there's just a lot of questions, and what I don't want is to, we go down this whole path and then we have to change because of a state law or something changes that we're going to have to just change course. But on the flip side, we're moving in the right direction. This document here, there wasn't anything else out there like it. The only other thing that we can compare our crime stats to is the Uniform Crime Report, which we're right there with that 70-30 nationwide for whites versus black. But there's more that we can share, and I think that's why this is a nice piece. I think we're probably we'll share it with others, and now it's going to be expectation not only of North Liberty but other area departments to start doing something very similar to this to get this information out. And I do want to thank not only my staff, but also Nick, Angela, and Ryan for helping putting this document together.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was kind of a specific, and again, it's going to help me to build context here over the next 2 weeks, is, and both Rakisha and Brent mentioned this in their comments, what sort of discretion do our officers, any officer, have when they're called out onto the scene? So a call comes in to 911 or through dispatch. And you touched on this in your report a little bit. There are some things that you absolutely have to arrest for. Is there back and forth? Does the officer ask who called? Do they have that information? Is a caller a repeat caller? Where if someone's reporting that a black kid is taking a bag of candy off of a step, does the officer know that in advance, who called, and any other circumstance? Do they have any contacts before they leave?
It really depends on what is reported to that 911 caller. The taking an item, taking candy off the steps is not as specific as what we get. We get an item was stolen from a porch, and they believe it's porch pirates, and it's an envelope, and there's just additional information that's provided. And they try to follow up on that. And so when the officers respond, usually, on a 911 call, there's going to be a couple officers, and they divide and conquer. One's going to go try to find the reporting party. The other's going to either try to find a suspect or any witnesses to see how they're going to investigate this. And so they do investigate. They do try. I mean, we get called all the time for things that are completely benign that we never should have been called for in the first place. But on the flip side, a person saw what they believed was suspicious activity or a crime being committed, and they're trying to do that neighborhood watch. They're trying to do that thing. So I'm very cautious because I don't want to have people not call the police.
Right.
And so we kind of walk that fine line. It is a double-edged sword, almost on all of those things that we respond to. But we do try to be reasonable. We try to be fair. We try to be just. Sometimes we do need to slow down because we're really just working on going to the next one. But on the flip side, they do investigate. They do try to determine if there is a crime. If there's a crime, they move forward. If not, they go on their merry way.
Okay. And regarding the data, I promise this is the last question. Is that data that is known on who is calling this, who are making these calls into dispatch center? Is that data that can be analyzed, looked at? Is there any benefit to that? I guess it comes back to an educational component. If it's a person that is calling, once a week on a neighbor because they don't like them, for example, is there an educational component that can be gained from that data, or does that data even exist to analyze?
That data does not exist. We would have that information by basically a name, address, and phone number. Any other analytics, demographics with that is not. However, we do know the folks who routinely call the police on their neighbor. We know the folks who have that beef, and we go in there and we try to mediate as much as possible. And we do that quite often, in fact.
Okay. Thank you very much.
You bet.
Good questions. Thanks, Chris. Mr. Heyer, anything additional?
Nothing at this time. We'll move forward with the listening post and report back, and obviously the city council will report back at the August 11th meeting if there's nothing further tonight.
Anyone want to say anything here final? Good questions, folks. Good participation. I feel good about how we're starting on this thing. Next item we have is in regards to the employee handbook, resolution number 2020-61, a resolution approving amendment of the City of North Liberty Employee Handbook. And we had the little sneaky Scrivener's error again. So what did we change?
Yes, we did. This was as if you could have seen the mocked up version of the complete document, you might understand why this happened. Deb was beside herself when she saw this error, but it happens. It was a small piece on accrued vacation. So when employees max out at 960 sick hours, if they don't use any sick for 3 months in a row, they can qualify for another day of vacation time. And so that's what's being put back in, if you will, into the handbook.
Fair enough. Any questions on this? Anyone like to establish that resolution?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final discussion for question. Tracy, please.
Pollock,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Hoffman.
Resolution passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Social service funding, resolution 2020-62. This is an item that you dealt with the last council meeting on a request that was delayed. Whose fault? I don't care. It got here. You dealt with it quite well. And so this is in regards to the additional funding. So anyone wish to establish that grant?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final discussion for question. Tracy, please.
Wason,
Aye.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Pollock.
Aye.
Resolution passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Item 13, nuisances enumerated. Okay. Now's the time for a public hearing regarding the proposed ordinance amendment regarding nuisances. Before we go into that, Grant, did you want to do a little lead in on that one?
I would. Thank you, Mayor. As you all know, the city has a duty to maintain its infrastructure in order to maintain public health and safety. And in order to do that, we acquire easements over and across land for water and sewer, utilities, drainage ways, and so on, so that we have the right to enter onto land and get to our equipment and perform maintenance on it whenever necessary. But as you also know, folks here in town love their dogs, or their kids and their dogs and their lawns, and they build a lot of fences, and they don't always check to make sure whether they're building a fence over an easement that's held by the city. And so the common law provides that anyone who owns an easement, including the city, can just go ahead and remove any obstruction over that easement, whether they like it or not, as long as they don't disturb the peace in doing so. It has not been the city's practice to go up and rip out fences. In past, what we've done is we've talked first, of course, with property owners and said, hey, we've got a problem with this particular, you put up a fence and now we can't get to our stormwater drainage way facility or something to that effect. And we've had very good luck with that. This proposed amendment is designed to provide an additional tool in the city's toolbox, so that in addition to just talking with the property owner and trying to resolve things, in case there might arise a dispute, and rather than just going to remove the obstacle in question if it's not an emergency. I've written this amendment so as to conform with existing state law and existing ordinance concerning obstructions to streets and alleys and private ways and common areas. Arguably, a common area and private way might include an easement, but that's arguably, it's not specific. And so what I'm proposing the council do is adopt this amendment, which specifies and clarifies, gives some transparency to what the people might be able to expect, and then creates uses in our existing processes to be able to inform someone that there's a problem with code compliance. If they disagree, they can appeal, and they can go to court, and we can let the judge decide rather than having the city be the ultimate arbiter. This was basically done in response to one specific offense that got put up, but also generally in response to Councilor Smith's and our goal towards moving towards a code compliance rather than code enforcement mechanism. So this is intended to give us another tool that allows us to solve problems with a lighter touch than we might otherwise need to.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Do we have any oral or written comments, Tracy?
None have been received.
Anyone online wishing to speak? Hearing none, call the public hearing to a close. Pardon me? Okay. First consideration of ordinance number 2020-11, an ordinance amending chapter 50.02 of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances to include obstruction of public easements and an enumerated nuisance. Anyone wish to establish the first consideration?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final discussion or questions? Tracy, please.
Pollock,
Aye.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Smith.
Aye.
First consideration passes. 5 affirmative, none opposed. Vintage Estates. This will be the third and final consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2020-02. An ordinance amending chapter 167, North Liberty Code of Ordinances by amending the use regulations on property located at 175 South Jones Boulevard, located in North Liberty, Iowa, to those set forth in the municipal code for the RS4 PAD single unit residential planned area development. Anyone wish to establish the third and final reading?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Final discussion or questions? Tracy, please.
Harrington,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Wason.
Aye.
Third and final consideration passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Next item is chapter 180 ordinance regarding minimum low openings on plat requirements. This will be the third and final consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2020-05. An ordinance amending the minimum low opening requirements of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances. Anyone wish to establish the third and final?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any questions? Tracy, please.
Pollock,
Aye.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Harrington.
Aye.
Third and final consideration passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Next item, chapter 146-05, an ordinance regarding rental permit guest. This will be the third and final consideration of ordinance number 2020-06, an ordinance amending the rental permit requirements of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances. Anyone wish to establish the third and final reading?
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded. Final discussion or questions? Tracy, please.
Pollock,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Hoffman.
Aye.
Third and final consideration passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Next is chapter 90.23, ordinance regarding backflow customer responsibility. This will be the third and final consideration adoption of ordinance number 2020-07, an ordinance clarifying customer and contractor responsibilities for backflow prevention device inspection and reporting. Anyone wish to establish the third and final reading?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Final discussion or questions? Tracy, please.
Pollock,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason.
Aye.
Third and final consideration passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Next is chapter 50.07, ordinance regarding nuisance ordinance scrivener's error. This is the third and final consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2020-08, an ordinance correcting a scrivener's error in chapter 50 of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances. Anyone wish to establish that third and final reading?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Gotta get rid of those scriveners, whatever they are. They sound like closet gremlins that cause problems. Any questions? Tracy, please.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Harrington,
Aye.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason.
Aye.
Third and final consideration passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Chapter 4107, ordinance regarding toy guns. This was to be the third consideration and adoption of ordinance number 2020-09, an ordinance amending chapter 41 of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances. Grant, you wanted to say something in regards to this?
Yes, Mayor, briefly. I don't know if it's possible to die of boredom, but I don't want to risk it. The long and short of this is that there has been a state law that's passed that is in direct conflict with this, and continuing to pass this in its current form could potentially expose the city to liability. I think I'd recommend that the council move to table this particular item indefinitely until the language can be modified so that it would be in compliance with state code.
Very good. Anyone wish to establish the motion to table?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Motions to table are non-debatable. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Just when you think you got the rules down, they change them at the state.
On the 11th hour, yes, Mayor.
Next is chapter 40.03, ordinance regarding disorderly conduct. Third and final consideration, adoption of ordinance number 2020-10, an ordinance amending chapter 4003 of the North Liberty Code of Ordinances. Anyone wish to establish the third and final reading of that ordinance?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion or questions? Tracy, please.
Smith,
Aye.
Wason,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Hoffman,
Aye.
Harrington.
Harrington,
Aye.
thank you.
Uh-huh.
Ordinance passes 5 affirmative, none opposed. Old business.
I do have a little, one thing. I'm not sure, maybe I just totally spaced off last meeting, but we kind of had blues and barbecue, and it was not the way we had anticipated it in the past, but I know a lot of work really went into trying to do the best we could with what we had. And I just wanted to make sure that we get some thanks out to everybody who really worked on kind of coming up with some nifty alternative activities. I was there in the park about 1 o'clock. There was nobody else in the park other than my wife. We had a good time, and we listened to the online version with the music and enjoyed that. So just again, appreciate everybody trying to do the best we could this year. So I'm really looking forward to next year.
Thanks for your comments, Brian. Any other old business? New business?
I don't necessarily have any new business, but I just want to remind people to wear their mask while out in public, and also to participate in the listening post. This will give us an opportunity to really hear from all constituents in the community and figure out a way moving forward how to stay ahead of the game and to make North Liberty the best community that we know it can be collectively. So. And thank you, Chief. Thank you, everyone who has been doing work behind the scenes and making sure that we are being as transparent as we can to our community. And for everyone else, just keeping our businesses thriving and trying to just keep a positive attitude during a lot of these uncertain times. So thank you to everyone for doing their part.
Thank you for those comments. Any other new business, folks?
Mayor, I'd like to
Ryan,
draw.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, Ryan, can you just remind people where they can see the schedule for the listening posts?
Yes, I can. It's on our website. Just go in and search listening posts and it'll pop right up. The first one is tomorrow on a Zoom at 11:30. You do need to register for that. And you can do it right there at northlibertyiowa.org and then search listening post.
Okay, Brent, I think I saw you.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to draw attention to the city's pop-up connection center that will be happening tomorrow night, 4 to 6 at Van Allen Elementary. A couple of counselors will be there volunteering through the United Way. The United Way will be there supplying services to help get families who are in need connected with services in our community. So if you are a family in need of connection services, whether that's assistance with filling out the census, if that's filling out online paperwork to get the kids ready for school, you need access to online services, or you just need help with food insecurity type of things, we'd like to see you. Please bring one person. Because of COVID, one person from each family can attend, and we'll be there to walk you in. Everybody will be required to wear face masks. We'll all be in masks. We'll be smiling behind the masks, but have them on. And we look forward to providing service to those in our community that have a need right now. So, like to see you.
Thank you for those comments. Anybody else have anything? Thank you for a very productive evening. Appreciate seeing all of you. We'll see you next time. We are adjourned.